Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little for PokerNews.com. Today we have an interesting hand from a 1-3 no-limit cash game hand that one of my students showed me. Let's take a look. Folds around to the player in the hijack, who makes it 3 big blinds, $10 at 1-3 no limit. This is a loose, splashy player, and with Ace-10 of spades, I think you can go either way between calling or 3-betting, depending on how you expect your opponent to react. If you expect your opponent to 4-bet very frequently, if you 3-bet, you should probably just call because Ace-10 suited flops very, very well. You typically want to be essentially 3-bet bluffing with your hands like Ace-10 offsuit. They would much prefer to play the pot heads up in position as the aggressor. Whereas your big suited hands, like Ace-10 suited, King-Queen suited, Queen-Jack suited, don't really mind if you see the flop multi-way. And also, if you see the flop with a deep stack to pot ratio, you'll be able to better make use of your straights and flush draws because you're putting in very little money immediately for the chance to win a lot. So I typically call in the spot, but in the small stakes cash games like 1-3, if you know your loose splashy opponent is going to call your 3-bet with stuff like Ace-8 offsuit or 10-8 offsuit, well then you should just 3-bet straight up for value. So in a higher stakes game, very often you are 3-betting very polarized, just your best hands and some bluffs that have a blocker, like an ace or a king blocker that makes it more difficult for your opponent to have a good hand. And then you're calling with a lot of hands that flop very, very well, like Ace-10 suited. But in a smaller stakes game, or against people who are calling stations to some extent, who are not going to put you in difficult spots by 4-betting, but will either fold a lot or call a lot pre-flop, you should be very inclined to 3-bet. So in this situation, my student did 3-bet to $32, which I think is fine. Loose splashy player calls, I have to presume, with a very wide range. That is why you would 3-bet this type of player in the first place. Flop comes Ace-5-4, 2 diamonds, and the loose splashy player checks. I think this is a pretty nice spot to go for a value bet with this hand for sure. And in reality, I'm probably just betting with my entire range because I know my opponent does not have a ton of great hands here, and I know that if I'm 3-betting, I have all the good big card hands, and the ace lines up very well with those hands. So we're going to be betting in this scenario very frequently, and I don't think you need to go particularly large. I like a small size. If we did go small with a hand like Queen-Jack of hearts here, the plan very often would be to continue betting the turn plus the river. I know that starts to risk a lot of chips. You may say, but won't the opponent just call down with any ace? Maybe they will, but what about when they don't have an ace? What about when they check call your flop bet with a 5 or pocket 8s, right? They're going to end up folding that a lot of the time by the river, even if they are loose and splashy. I have lots and lots of data from online poker at small stakes and medium stakes and high stakes, but even in the small stakes games, people fold too often, not to flop bets, not to pre-flop bets, but they fold way too often to turn and river bets. So don't be afraid to blast them. So anyway, in this scenario, we don't have nothing. We have the top pair. So we are going to bet, likely using small sizes against this type of loose splashy player here. Look, in the small stakes games, you can be maximally exploitative. Do not be afraid to make the bet that you think will get exactly what you want to accomplish this time done. The idea of balance to some extent goes completely out the window when you have very good reads on your opponent and you know somewhat clearly how they're going to react. We make the nuts on the turn, that's good. So now, if the opponent does have pocket 6s, how much will they call? That should be a lot of their range, that very marginal junky type stuff. Well, those hands will call probably only a small bet at this point, like $30. How much will an ace call? It's going to be a smaller portion of the opponent's range, but they certainly could have it. If they do have an ace, then they'll probably call any bet, like $70, $80, $100. I don't think you want to just rip it all in for 2.5x pot or 2.3x pot, but I do think we have the best hand every time pretty much, and we are trying to get money in, and I think at this point we have to sort of ignore the fact that we could be against pocket 6s, because if we are against that type of very weak hand, maybe we bet $30 on the turn and $40 on the river and get called by our opponent's whole range, but we would much rather bet medium on the turn and then jam the river to get called by all the ace-x, and maybe even like a hero call Jack-10 of diamonds or something like that on the river. So I think I like to go ahead and size it up a little bit, like $70. I think this is nice. My student did a good job on this hand so far. When we bet 70, like I said, an ace is never folding, a flush draw is never folding, a straight draw is never folding. We are going to lose, well, we're going to make the pocket 6s fold, but that's okay. Also, this guy could still call like 6-5 type hands as well, given they're loose and splashy. So I like this size a lot. We do get called. River is the 4 of clubs. Backdoor flush draw comes in, and the opponent checks. 4 is pretty bad. But if you think about the opponent's range, they really should not have a ton of 4s. And while they do have some 4s, there are now fewer of them because, well, the second 4 just arrived. And also, they're way more likely to have an ace or a 5 or perhaps even a 10 at this point. So for that reason, I don't think we're so worried about the 4. Like, yeah, we lose to it. Yes, the opponent's never folding it, but the opponent's probably never folding an ace either. Now, the question becomes, how much can the opponent actually call with an ace? Say they have ace 2, right? For just ace 2 offsuit, which, loose splashy players certainly could because they don't know how to play poker very well. Against this type of player, will they call an all-in with ace 2 for 3/4 pot? I don't know. Maybe. In this scenario, if you think your opponent will call perhaps a $125 bet every time with an ace, but will fold to a jam, to an all-in, some portion of the time, then you should consider not going all in. You should strongly consider betting something like 125. However, if you know your opponent will literally always call with an ace because they just do not care, then we should probably just rip it all in because the ace is a lot of our opponent's range. In this scenario, what would I do? I'd probably go 125 to leave the opponent a little bit of money left because I think I've found that a lot of the weak, splashy, small stakes players really just don't want to go broke. They don't care if you leave them with 20 big blinds. They just don't want to go broke. So I don't think I would go all in here, but if my student does go all in, I think that's definitely the default play and definitely what I would do against high stakes opponents. Student does go all in, and right here, like I said, I would not be surprised if our opponent folds ace 2. I also would not be surprised if they call with ace 2. So this is a situation where I think I'm willing to give up an extra $40, $50, $60 in exchange for just getting called every time, but I definitely think it is close. Opponent does call. You think we win? We're going to win here most of the time. And ace 7 offsuit. So our hero nailed it. They nailed the read, loose, splashy. And this is the type of thing you see a lot of people do. They make top pair and they just will not let it go. And in this case, student actually extracted an additional 40 or 50 bucks more than I would. So good job there. And like I said, if you know this player just doesn't fold top pair, you might as well get full value. And this is why it's very important to make sure you're paying attention to your opponents and maximally exploiting them. That is very, 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 very important. Our hero did that and completely stacked our opponent. Nice job. Even with worse than ace 10, by the way, I still would have made the same bet. Like, if I had ace jack or better, I think I'm jamming. You don't necessarily want to jam if you have worse than ace 10. Well, if you have ace 9, because when you have ace 9, you're chopping, right, against an ace. And an ace is never folding. So in that scenario, you're going to want to use a smaller bet to try to get called by the very, very junky hands, right? So if instead we had ace 9 or lower, I would be betting smaller on the river, probably. Let's go back to it. I would probably bet something like $65 to try to get called by the very weak hands. And if I had ace jack or better, I would be jamming it all in, or betting, almost all in like our student did. So nice hand. So that's it for today. If you enjoyed this hand history review, click like, click subscribe. Go ahead, take a second, do it. It won't take you long, just do. That's your way of saying thank you. And if you don't want to say thank you, well, you don't have to come back next time. I will not be offended. I understand I am not for everyone, and that is okay. If you do like my work, though, check out my website, pokercoaching.com. We have all sorts of educational training content by myself and my hand-selected group of world-class professional poker players who are helping students on a very, very regular basis take their skills to the next level, letting them win life-changing money from poker. So make sure you check that out at pokercoaching.com. Thanks for being here. Good luck in your games, and I'll talk to you next time.